a very good week last week for the LSU Tigers in recruiting. Tigers now ranked as a top 5 class in the country for 2021 by virtue of what was accomplished last week, and it was a very good week to say the least. Joining us now to talk about it, does an excellent job for TigerBait.com, covering LSU football and recruiting. He is Preston Guy. Preston, great to have you back with us. Welcome.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for having me, man. I teased it a little bit last week, but, man, it came to fruition in a big way this week.
Well, it certainly did. And of course, 3 guys committing to LSU this past week, all of whom are significant players, including the likes of Naquan Brown, Chris Hilton, Keanu Cote, to name the 3. And I want to talk about those 3 and then also talk about what's to come. We've seen a lot of other things, including Smil Mondon saying that LSU is one of his 5 finalists. But let's talk about the 3 from this past week individually. And I guess we'll start with Naquan Brown. He's kind of an undersized guy on the outside, but an edge rusher with a lot of speed, right?
Oh, yeah. Naquan Smith is going to be Naquan Brown. He's a big boy, 6'3", 205. A lot of people had him in that outside linebacker role if he were to go into a 3-4. Obviously, with LSU switching into the 4-3 with Bo Pelini coming in, all of a sudden he fits perfectly into that, edge rushing, speed defensive end who's a little more stout than you would have as a linebacker in the 3-4 here. He'll be a good fit. You're going to see LSU push for a lot of guys in this mold coming up in this class because they are switching over the scheme and they need guys who fit that scheme better. And Keanu Cote, very similar. He's even a little bit bigger at 6'4". He'll be able to get some long arms up in the quarterback's face on the edge. So watch for that. I don't think that these guys will be the last defensive ends we see in this class. I know LSU's got their eyes on at least 1 or 2 more guys on the defensive line coming up, big name guys for sure.
Chris Hilton, of course, a wide receiver, and it's funny because LSU has been known as DBU for several years now in reference to their defensive backs and all the great players that they've produced. But maybe we ought to start adjusting that to WRU. LSU has really come up with some terrific receivers in the last decade or so. Tell us about Chris Hilton.
And Chris Hilton was the guy I was teasing at last week, as a lot of fans have been kind of upset that, LSU hasn't really rated in-state yet. It is a bit of a down year in-state, but they only had one other commitment from Louisiana. That's Peyton Todd, the punter from West Monroe. Now, he is the number 1 punter in the country, but a punter nonetheless. A lot of people were getting a little grumpy because they love seeing the Louisiana players here. They hate seeing guys like Devonta Smith go to Alabama, and then you got to watch him, win a national championship on, what was that, 2nd and 26, and then, he catches a big long pass against LSU this year. Fans truly do hate seeing Louisiana players do that. But although we're probably not going to see the large numbers that we're used to just because of it's not the greatest year that the state's ever put out, you're not going to see quite as many, but I do think we're going to start seeing LSU hit on some more guys, including Walker High School receiver Brian Thomas, who's actually a little bit higher rated than Hilton was. And I've gotten a chance to cover back in my prep days with the Advocate. I had a chance to cover both of those young men. And I can tell you they're both very deserving, good athletes. But now LSU is going to look up, and they're going to have 4 receivers in this class. Once you look at JoJo Earl and Deion Smith from out of state, and really all of them are top 100 guys based on what site you're looking at. And I mean, there's not historically LSU hasn't done quite that good with as many deep guys at wide receiver, and I think that's where you're really starting to see the effect of last year taking place. You now a big attraction to all these receivers coming in. I think this is going to be one of the better years we've ever seen in recruiting for LSU, both across the defensive line and in the receiving corps.
Visiting with Preston Guy of TigerBait.com. When you look at the in-state targets for LSU, not that many, but certainly some guys with great upside. Of course, Mason Smith out of Terrebonne is the guy that everybody talks about on a daily basis. Sage Ryan out of Lafayette Christian, the safety would be another guy that you mentioned. Brian Thomas, obviously, certainly another one of those significant targets. But outside of those guys, they really don't have many targets, if any, in Louisiana at this point, do they?
Yeah, there's a couple guys who are kind of on that fringe, and they're watching to see how they develop moving forward. Two names that come to mind immediately are Savion Jones is committed already. But Malik Neighbors is the one that comes to mind mostly. And there's certainly a couple other guys on that fringe, but they're not quite sure about. I know Destin Payson would be a guy out of Edna Carr. Usually they'd be all over, but because they already have so many incredible receivers they're looking at, I think they're going to kind of, let him go elsewhere. I know a lot of fans are upset about Kaleb Williams, the running back out of John Arrett, going to Alabama. He's committed there. I don't see that changing. But Malik Neighbors is the one I would keep an eye out just because he's kind of more in that athlete mold. He's a good 6 foot, 190, just that real – he might be able to plug into another spot, they feel. But we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But as for guys, you should expect LSU to go after hard. I mean, really, you kind of hit on them there with Sage Ryan, Mason Smith, and Brian Thomas. Mason Smith, of course, would be the crown jewel for this class for this year. He's the best defensive tackle I've looked at since Glenn Dorsey, and he's incredibly intelligent. I've had the pleasure of talking with him on a number of occasions, and he'll break down scheme and talks all sorts of good things. He wants to get a doctor's degree in physical therapy. So he's got high aspirations. He holds a 3.7 GPA, and one of the other things about Mason is he's told me his best friend is Corey Foreman out of California. He's a defensive end, and he's the number one player in the country. And I believe that Corey Foreman will follow Mason wherever he goes. So if LSU lands Mason Smith, that's a big name that you might get a package deal there with the number one player in the country.
That would be huge. One inside and one outside up front on defense for him, and a 5-star player. Tommy Brockermeyer, another guy, an offensive tackle that LSU is certainly in the mix for out of Fort Worth. Where do they stand with him right now? And also Tristan Lee, another tackle. That's another extremely highly rated player at his position offensively out of Virginia.
Yeah. So I'd say Tristan Lee is the one they're really going to be pushing hard for right now. Brockermeyer is obviously the more coveted guy. He's the 5-star guy. But he seems to be mostly on Alabama. And I know LSU fans, probably half your viewership is cringing listening to this, but, he's the number 5 player in the country, I believe consensus across all sites. He's a big boy. He's a true left or tackle. I mean, he's right at 6'6" and 283, very athletic. He's out of Fort Worth, Texas, which has been good for LSU, but most signs are pointing to looks like Saban's going to clean house with that one. Most experts have predicted him. And, in fact, if it weren't Alabama, most people are saying the runner-up would be Texas as of now. But LSU is certainly going to push as hard as they can for him. Tristan Lee, another 5-star guy, they're all up in there. He's the guy who's more up in the air. A lot of people don't know exactly where he's going to go. With the COVID stuff, his recruiting process has been kind of a bit of an anomaly here. It's been kind of quiet, and they don't know exactly where he's going to go. That being said, LSU's as much in the mix as anybody is for him. Whereas Brockermeyer, more eyes are kind of the signs are more closely pointing to Bama for him. So LSU needs offensive linemen in this class, and he knows that, and there's an opportunity for him to get on the field early. So I'd say I wouldn't say LSU's the favorite per se for Tristan Lee, but definitely they have as good a shot as anybody else.
Then, of course, the other news of this past weekend, Kaleb Williams choosing Oklahoma. No real surprise there. They were the favorite all along. And the fact that LSU already had Garrett Nussmeier in the fold, it's more than cushions the blow. They feel good about the guy they've got. Would they have liked to have had Williams? Sure. Did they ever think they were going to get him? Probably not.
Yeah, he's kind of one of those kids where if he wants to come play, doesn't matter what you have, you make room for him. That being said, it was kind of at one point, LSU was considered the favorite for Kaleb Williams. He wanted to drag out the process a little bit longer. Coach O and company, they were really high on Nussmeier. At the junior day camp a year ago, they both came to campus and was very clear that those were the two best arms on campus. And, I mean, you really couldn't say which one was truly better. They both looked phenomenal out there. And in fact, on the coaches board, they had Nussmeier as number, if Kaleb Williams was number one on their board, Nussmeier was 1A on their board. He was right there neck and neck. And Nussmeier was more willing to go ahead and pull the trigger and for the Tigers a few months ago. You know, they want to lock up their quarterbacks early so they can build their class around a quarterback every year here. That's what they went ahead and pulled him. But Kaleb Williams told me immediately after that commitment, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to back down here. I'm perfectly fine with another quarterback coming in this class if need be. You know, obviously that usually doesn't work out like that with these kids. We usually see people intimidated. They don't want to go into a class with two top 10 quarterbacks. They want to be their own. They want to be the star. So it would have been a shocker to see Kaleb Williams actually pull LSU. But I will tell you this. He told me 3 days before his commitment, he said, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if I picked that purple and gold hat. So he kept the coaches going until the bitter end there.
Looking ahead to the future, we see that once more a familiar name, a guy by the name of Etienne, this time Trevor Etienne, gets offered by Clemson. This is a guy that LSU has already offered in the future. Just finished his sophomore season, gone into his junior year. Of course, his older brother at Clemson, which leads a lot of people to believe that Clemson may have the inside track. Of course, LSU and Alabama, among others, have offered him too. What's the story there with regard to Trevor Etienne?
Yeah, no, of course, Ogeron and company really do want Travis Etienne. You know, just like, you know, he's actually at this point in his career a stronger prospect than his older brother was. You know, of course, his older brother, you know, struggled with, having an ACL tear his junior year. That's kind of the money year for most prospects. And you know, he just, Trevor Etienne hadn't had those same struggles. I think the coaches would love to bring him on board. That being said, you know, of course, you know, most suspect there's going to be sour grapes in that family because LSU waited so long to offer Travis Etienne. They waited till after his senior season or at the end of his senior season. You know, and anytime you're in that predicament, you know, it's not going to look or feel great with the family. It's kind of, you felt unwanted. At this point, most people are kind of, it's early. You know, you're more than a year out on that class for the class of 2022. Most people would say Clemson is the favorite there.
Understandable. The other news regarding LSU, which we have on CrescentCitySports.com this morning, is that Peter Parrish is no longer listed on the LSU Athletics website football roster. Of course, we all know that he was suspended indefinitely from the program back on March 10th for violating team rules, and he was a signee by LSU in 2019. So if he's not on the roster anymore, that means the only player with any experience on the roster at quarterback is Miles Brennan.
Yeah, that's right. And behind him, you got two true freshmen who are going to be chomping at the bits for that backup role. You got TJ Finley and Max Johnson, both highly recruited guys.
Yeah, they are. And, of course, when you look at those guys, you got some pretty interesting size on both of them. Finley is an absolute monster. I mean, I did a couple of high school games. He's so big, it's ridiculous. But Max Johnson's pretty big, too, and he's got excellent bloodlines, of course.
You know, it's very funny watching how different these two quarterbacks are. TJ Finley, for anybody listening, he reminds me more of Jamarcus Russell than any prospect I've seen in a long time. He is big. He has an arm that goes for days. But that being said, you know, his technique is a little bit sloppy. And a lot of kids who are tall like him come in as freshmen and they're sloppy. But I'm going to tell you what, TJ Finley is ready to work. He, you know, notably, he captured headlines on National Signing Day. He showed up for practice on National Signing Day as an early enrollee. So he came and he was ready to work. He's trying to fight for this backup role. Max Johnson, the left-handed quarterback out of Georgia, you know, he's nephew of Brad Johnson, the NFL veteran quarterback. He is very polished. And his senior season, you know, he was a little bit, you know, he especially statistically struggled to complete 50% of his balls as a junior, only threw for about 1,500 yards or so. But then his senior season, he blew up. His technique was extremely sharp. His footwork was very clean. This is particularly prominent for left-handed guys because they tend to struggle with, but his release got a lot better, a lot quicker. So he looks like a really clean, polished quarterback, albeit probably with less arm strength and natural talent than TJ Finley has. So as far as I can see, with two quarterbacks coming in the class, this is going to be one of the closest contested backup battles we've seen in a while.
Agreed. Just a minute or two left with Preston Guy of TigerBait.com. Looking at underrated players in Louisiana. Look, I am familiar with the guys in the New Orleans area since I see them frequently and do a lot of games. There's a few kids here that are definitely maybe better than where they're ranked right now or better than where they're being recruited. Jackie Marshall out of East St. John is a really good football player. The same thing can be said of wide receiver Parrish Johnson of Booker T. Washington, but that's a position that LSU has a bunch of players at as well. And another kid that's really good is running back Logan Diggs out of Archbishop Rummel. So there's a few guys, at least from my perspective, that I've seen play, that I've looked at, that certainly I think are maybe above their pay grade in terms of where they're being recruited right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely a lot of guys. And like I said, there's a lot of guys in that fringe area. You know, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of guys who would have offers from LSU already before the Orgeron era. And Orgeron has elevated the recruiting profile where really good players in state are now no longer getting those offers, you know, automatically like they used to. I mean, yeah, they're good players. They're SEC caliber. And, you know, they might even be all SEC caliber one day. But, Orgeron is jam-packing his 25-member class. So one of the things that stands out for me is LSU right now they don't have a consensus five-star guy. Ray John Davis has been 5 stars in and out, but they don't have a consensus 5-star guy yet. But they have 13 4-star players out of 14, and out of 15, and one of the guys who isn't happens to be the number 1 punter in the country. So they have the most 4-star players in the country committed right now, despite having 10 open spots. So you got to be really just a top-notch player to get that LSU. It's more coveted than it used to be. It just is. I mean, Orgeron has upped the ante. One guy who stands out to me, I like Javon Grigsby at Scotlandville. I had the opportunity to see him in my prep careers, and I've watched him. I would like to see what he can do. It's just one of those deals where it's show me in your senior year for him.
I get it. And you look at their recruiting class right now with the 15 commits. It's amazing how LSU has recruited so well nationally. Players from Louisiana, Florida, Ohio, Mississippi, Michigan, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Virginia. I mean, it's really a smorgasbord of who's who from all over the country.
Oh yeah, and it used to be if Louisiana wasn't having a jam-packed class, we just have a down year in recruiting. We're not seeing that anymore. Orgeron is just I look, as far as I'm aware, LSU has never recruited at this level out of state.
I agree. Of course, when it's a great year in recruiting in Louisiana, it's guaranteed to be a very good year for LSU. The numbers aren't as plentiful this year. There is quality as compared to quantity, but doesn't matter when you go out of state and get the kind of talent that they're getting right now. It's pretty special, to say the least. Preston Guy, remind everybody about how they can follow you online and how they can get your information at tigerbait.com.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate follows on social media. I have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are my three big ones I do, at pguy_77 on all of them. Sorry about the underscore. Apparently, pguy77 was already taken. I'm a little salty about it, but that's okay. But also, y'all can check out tigerbait.com. We put out tons of good content, both free and premium. I can tell you the premium stuff, it's a real good deal. If you want to give it a try, just hop on. It's $1 to look at all that we put out for free. We're the best in the business when it comes to covering LSU recruiting. And if you don't like it, then after a week you can just scrap it, and there goes $1. But afterward, I do recommend doing the annual subscription. It's just $99, and you get all year. You get tons of LSU content. You get it emailed. You get text alerts whenever there's a big news item happening with tons of details following up. Y'all go give it a try. I promise you, you won't regret it.
Preston Guy, tigerbait.com. Always a pleasure. Thanks for visiting, and we'll talk again soon. You hear?
Thanks for having me, Ken. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. All right, that's the latest on LSU and lots of news there, to say the least.